For decades, El Salvador was synonymous with gang violence and crime. This small Central American nation, home to just over 6 million people, was gripped by fear and dominated by two of the world's most violent criminal organizations, MS-13 and Barrio 18. These gangs turned entire neighborhoods into battlegrounds, with extortion, kidnappings, and drug trafficking defining daily life. Statistics and global context. In 2015, El Salvador recorded 105 homicides per 100,000 people, the highest murder rate in the world at the time. For comparison, neighboring Honduras recorded 57 per 100,000, while safer countries like the United States and Canada reported rates of 4.5 and 1.7, respectively. Life in El Salvador was a constant state of fear. Prison system under strain. The country's prison system reflected the chaos outside. By 2018, facilities designed for 18,000 inmates held over 39,000, a staggering 215% overcrowding rate. Many prisoners were gang members jailed for murder, extortion, and drug-related crimes. Yet, from their cells, gang leaders continued to run their operations, using contraband phones and a network of bribed officials. Act 1. The rise of Nayib Bukele. In 2019, Salvadorans turned to a new leader who promised radical change, Nayib Bukele. A former mayor with a bold, charismatic presence, Bukele campaigned on one key promise: ending the violence that had plagued the nation for decades. Campaign promises. Bukele at a rally. The time for excuses is over. Together, we will take back our streets, rebuild our communities, and give every Salvadoran the right to live without fear. Bukele's message resonated deeply, especially with younger voters. He won the presidency by a landslide, becoming El Salvador's youngest modern president at the age of 37. With a fresh mandate, he wasted no time in launching his plan to tackle crime head-on. Act 2. The Territorial Control Plan. Bukele's cornerstone policy was the Territorial Control Plan, an ambitious multi-phase strategy to reclaim control from the gangs. Launched shortly after he assumed office, the plan aimed to dismantle gang networks, restore order, and build lasting peace. Key components of the plan. 1. Military and police deployment. Bukele deployed thousands of soldiers and police officers to gang-dominated neighborhoods. They set up checkpoints, conducted door-to-door searches, and dismantled gang safe houses, ensuring a visible and sustained presence in these areas. 2. Prison reforms. The government implemented strict measures inside prisons, including jamming cell signals to prevent gang leaders from coordinating operations. Surveillance and security were ramped up, and privileges for inmates were reduced. 3. Technology integration. Drones, surveillance cameras, and advanced data analytics became key tools in tracking gang movements and targeting key members. 4. Economic and social investments. Bukele paired enforcement with social programs, investing in education, healthcare, and job training in vulnerable communities. This dual approach aimed to provide alternatives to gang life for at-risk youth. Act 3. The War on Gangs. While the Territorial Control Plan made early progress, a turning point came in March 2022, when a surge in gang-related homicides shook the country. Bukele declared a state of emergency, granting security forces unprecedented powers to detain suspected criminals. Mass arrests and crackdowns. Under the emergency measures, over 73,000 individuals were arrested within a year. Bukele's administration targeted gang leaders, foot soldiers, and even individuals suspected of collaborating with gangs. This massive wave of arrests overwhelmed the justice system, but severely weakened gang structures. Comparison to previous administrations. In contrast to Bukele's aggressive strategy, previous governments often negotiated truces with gangs or relied on sporadic crackdowns. These approaches yielded limited results, allowing the gangs to regroup and expand their influence. Criticism of tactics. Human rights organizations raised concerns about the arrests, accusing the government of bypassing due process. Reports of wrongful detentions and mistreatment of detainees sparked protests and drew international scrutiny. Act 4. Dramatic results. Despite the controversies, the numbers tell a remarkable story. El Salvador's homicide rate dropped from 52 per 100,000 in 2018 to just 7 per 100,000 by 2023, a staggering 93% decrease. Visual timeline. A graph shows the steady decline in murder rates, accompanied by images of now peaceful streets and markets. Global comparisons. El Salvador's current murder rate is on par with countries like the United States, and far below those of neighboring Guatemala and Honduras, which still face significant gang violence. Impact on extortion and other crimes. Reports of extortion, one of the gang's primary revenue streams, also dropped sharply. Businesses that once paid protection fees began to operate without fear, signaling a shift in the balance of power. Act 5. Economic and social transformation. The decline in violence brought profound changes to El Salvador's economy and society. For the first time in years, the country began to see opportunities for growth and investment. Tourism revival. El Salvador, once avoided by travelers, saw a 90% increase in international tourism between 2021 and 2023. Surfers flocked to its world-class beaches, and adventure seekers explored its natural beauty. Foreign investment. Businesses once wary of operating in a high-risk environment began setting up in El Salvador. This influx of capital created jobs and boosted the economy. Rebuilding communities. With gangs losing their grip, neighborhoods once controlled by violence saw a resurgence of daily life. Schools reopened, markets thrived, and families felt safe walking the streets again. Political stability. Bukele's success in reducing crime solidified his popularity. By 2023, his approval rating exceeded 85%, making him one of the most well-regarded leaders in the region. His strong mandate allowed him to push through additional reforms, further stabilizing the country. Reduction in corruption. The crackdown on gangs also curtailed corruption within law enforcement and local government, as the networks of influence that gangs had built over decades were dismantled. Act 6. Criticism and ethical questions. Bukele's hardline approach, while effective, raised important ethical questions. Critics argued that the state of emergency gave the government too much power, undermining the rule of law. Mass arrests and due process concerns. Human rights organizations reported cases of individuals being detained without sufficient evidence. Families of detainees protested what they called arbitrary arrests, and some activists warned of the erosion of civil liberties. Press freedom. Bukele's administration also faced accusations of suppressing media coverage of gang-related issues, sparking concerns about freedom of the press. Voice of critics. We want safety, but not at the cost of justice. Every citizen deserves their day in court. Bukele's defense. We have delivered results. El Salvador is no longer the murder capital of the world. Yes, the decisions were tough, but they were necessary to save lives and ensure a brighter future for our people. Act 7. The future of El Salvador. Today, El Salvador is a country transformed. Streets once controlled by gangs are now bustling with activity. Families feel a renewed sense of hope, and the nation's reputation as a dangerous place is fading fast. Visuals of renewal. Images of children playing in parks, thriving markets, and tourists enjoying El Salvador's scenic landscapes showcase the profound changes. Unanswered questions, yet challenges remain. Critics warn that the reliance on emergency powers could set a dangerous precedent, and rebuilding trust in institutions will take time. Can El Salvador sustain its newfound peace, or will the heavy-handed tactics lead to unintended consequences down the road? Conclusion. A leader and a legacy. Nayib Bukele's presidency has reshaped El Salvador, reducing crime to historic lows and giving millions of Salvadorans hope for a better future. But his leadership style has also sparked debate worldwide. Is he a visionary leader who succeeded where others failed? Or does his approach risk undermining the democratic values needed for long-term stability? The answers to these questions will define not only his legacy, but also the future of El Salvador. What do you think? Did Bukele strike the right balance between justice and security, or were the sacrifices too great? Share your perspective in the comments, and let's discuss the lessons the world can learn from El Salvador's transformation.